All right, welcome to this lesson on types of camping. And I'm going to give you a little note today you can answer some questions as you go along from your question worksheet. Hopefully you've printed it off and have it ready to go. And, as you know, taking outdoor ed is a course about going into the outdoors and into the wilderness. And I wanted to start off with some things explaining the different types of camping that exist. So we kind of clarify our understanding of camping. So camping, by definition, is an outdoor activity. And I'm just going to turn my marker on here so I can highlight. So camping is an outdoor activity involving overnight stays where you're away from home and you use a different shelter such as a tent or a recreation vehicle, okay? And in today's world, probably the most advertised type of camping is actually what we refer to as RV camping, and sometimes I tend to refer to it as glamping. It's sort of a glorified way of getting out and camping. It's not the kind of camping I did as a kid with my folks, but it's and not the kind of camping we do in our course, but it's a great way to get away from home and get out and enjoy things. And I just want to kind of clarify some of these things and show you some of the different ways that you can do this. Even within glamping, things change dramatically. So there's different types of RVs that you can get. And the self-propelled RVs, in other words, one where the motor is in it, have different types. There's an AClass, which kind of looks like a bus. The guy's right up front, the driver's sitting right here, and you're like a bus. These things are often really large, 40, 50 feet long. They got slide outs on the side. They are going to include everything that you would have at home, and a lot of retirees get them because you get a lot of amenities that would come from home and make you feel really comfortable. If you don't want to quite go as big as an A-class RV, people will go down to a C-class RV. And one of the things about a C-class is you'll notice is that there's this spot that goes over top of what's kind of like a truck, okay? So they're based on usually a 3500 series truck, often Ford or a Ram pickup, or even some other brand models that do them, Nissan and various manufacturers have them. And then they build the camper along the back, and they have this spot up above. Usually there's a sleeping quarter in here, and then we have a door. This one here also has a slide out. They come in various lengths. Shortest ones might be 20, 21 feet, and then they might go all the way up to 35, 40 feet, sometimes even 50 feet. Although usually when they get that long, they tend to go more to an A-class camper, which is more designed on like a bus chassis. And it's a lot to do with that kind of materials that they're built from. And then we go to the next type, which is a B-class camper. I'd like to one day maybe have a B-class camper. I think this is a sort of a compromise that I could live with. Not too crazy big. Of course, as we get smaller, we get better gas mileage, and I kind of like the idea of being able to travel around with lower gas mileage. So the B-class camper is built on a van. Often you'll see these kind of vans running around town as delivery vehicles, FedEx and whatnot, and they can be converted into these things. And that's what often these companies do is they buy the van and then they convert it. They do include lots of amenities, even like I can see on this one, an air conditioner up top here. Right there, that's the air conditioner up on top. They have an awning here, sliding doors, and you open up in the back. It's pretty incredible if you want to watch a couple of videos on how these are laid out and stuff, how they can get like a little tiny kitchen in there, a bed, and a garage. You can carry your bikes and everything else, and it's unbelievable what they can do. And the gas mileage is comparable to that of maybe a pickup truck, a 1500 series pickup truck, and so it's not terrible. Whereas the C-class and A-class campers are going to get much worse gas mileage, and this allows you to travel around, go to a lot of different places, and spend some time maybe at RV parks or even boondock, like out in the off the grid camping with them, and they're really good. Then of course we go to sort of things like travel trailers and things that get pulled behind, and there's a whole different series of travel trailers that can be looked in. This is sort of your big dual axle, lots of amenities. You can pull along. Again, these things can be really long or shorter, anywhere from I've seen them as short as like 15 or 16 feet or even 12 feet, sometimes really quite small, all the way up to 40 feet long. So it all depends on what you want in your RV. Here's a picture just kind of showing some of the other different types they have. You have pop-up campers. When I was a kid growing up, we had a pop-up camper, and you didn't really have near the same number of amenities in that as you do in some of these bigger ones that we've shown above. You have the travel trailer like I showed up there. You have a fifth wheel style. My dad once owned a fifth wheel. Truck campers. These were really popular out west. You saw a lot of people with truck campers. Pickup trucks were pretty popular there, and people would get their camper. They have usually some stakes or legs that come down and allow you to drive off the pickup truck from it. And it was quite handy. We see some more of these teardrop shaped tent trailers, which are quite popular. And then, of course, more recently, we have these things called toy haulers where they'll drop down the back and you can drive in different toys, everything from maybe bicycles to motorcycles and quads and maybe even a snowmobile if you wanted one day, and put it in the back. And when you take the RV or the toy out of the hauler, then often bedding and different things can come in, so they can be used as a way to transport your toy as well as a camper inside them. And they're becoming pretty popular nowadays. In fact, my wife said if we were going to get a towable, she'd want it to be a toy hauler so we can drag along more things with us when we go to different places. Now, some of the things about these RVs that are quite interesting is they often have full-on electricity, even off-grid electricity. So they have battery systems and solar panels to support the electricity. They have hot and cold water systems. Usually propane will power those. Heat, which would be propane again. Air conditioning, which would run off the electricity. Fridges and freezers running off the electricity. And a full kitchen, and full washrooms. Gray water, which means wastewater. Black water, which would be toilet water, can be put right off of them. So they're really like carrying a home behind your vehicle. You're just bringing along almost all the amenities that come from home. You can use them off grid, meaning like you can go out into the wilderness and just park anywhere and run them, or you can go to RV parks, which is probably what the majority of people do. But more and more people are starting to look at the off grid options and go to places like, quite wild and wildernessy. The bigger the unit is, the less accessible off grid and off road places are. So that was one of the reasons I kind of like the BClass van, is that you do have the ability to go to some places that you wouldn't be able to go with a big 35 or 40 foot RV, and that is appealing to me. I like the idea of being more in the wilderness. They can also act really good as a base camp for wilderness camping, so you might use them as a place to go, and then from that camp do day trips or even one night or overnighters from your RV. That's how I hope to use mine to a certain extent, is do lots of day trips, hiking, maybe canoeing, biking, and various other things where you just take off from your RV and go and explore the wilderness around you, which is really what I think, camping is about, is just getting outside and getting out into the wilderness. Okay. All right, so if we move down from that, we tend to go to what's known as car camping, and this was really popular back in the 70s and 80s. You saw a lot of people doing this kind of camping before RV camping kind of exploded onto the scenes in the last 20 years. And usually you had a tent as a shelter, and your car was really nearby, and you just drove somewhere and you go, well, I don't want to sleep in the back of my car, which some people will do. They would bring a tent along and they'd sleep in their tent, and we call that car camping. I think if somebody was just sleeping in the car or the back of their van or something, it's really kind of similar in many ways, kind of a halfway between the RV and the car camping thing. So there's all kinds of different things. So you bring your shelter along and you set it up outside. So you got far less amenities than RV camping, less electricity. You might have a little bit of electricity. You have heat in your car, and your kitchen options are, way less as well. You're probably going to bring along something that you're going to cook from. But you're going to be setting it outside. You're not indoors while you're cooking, those kind of things, okay? You might have a tarp or two that you use in conjunction with your vehicle, but at the end of the day, this is not quite as comfortable maybe as RV camping for many people. And that's why it's kind of lost flavor to the RV camping, I think, is that it's just much more luxurious. In this case, you do still have your vehicle for emergencies, bad weather. I mean, if a bear comes into camp, you can get in your car, lock the doors, roll up the windows, and that is a real issue if you're really deep into the wilderness. Okay, bad weather hits, lightning storm comes or whatever, and you're not comfortable in your tent, or you don't think it's got the waterproofness that you'd like, you can get into your vehicle. And probably the bigger thing that people do is they store their food in their car away from animals. And this is a real issue when you start wilderness camping, is that your food is accessible in many cases to animals, and you have to think about how you're going to protect that food. This allows, this kind of camping does allow you to get a little further off grid than maybe RV camping. And probably the bigger thing is it's way, way, way less expensive. Like, you're not investing huge amounts of money into an RV or a vehicle. So, for a few $1,000s, you can buy your tent and all your camping gear and be ready to go, as opposed to, if you're buying an RV, that's going to be a much bigger expense. Okay. And the other thing is you don't have to buy the most expensive and the lightest weight camping equipment, because it's just going in the back of your RV or your SUV, and so you have lots of room for it, and you don't have to carry it very far, just a few feet away from your vehicle, so you're not worrying about weight and stuff like that. Okay, all right, let's move down to the next one, which I call bike camping. So now we're going to trade in our car and go bike camping. And this is becoming more and more popular nowadays. It's something I've done in the past and love doing. Really enjoy this aspect of camping, because I like cycling. And so there's really two types of ways to do it. Bike touring, where you turn your car into a bicycle. And so this here on this side is what they refer to a bike packing setup. And so what you see here is they have what's called a frame bag. I'll just kind of point things out here. This here is the frame bag. Maybe I'll just use a red pen and circle them. That's a frame bag right in the frame. And you can pack all kinds of things in here. Usually they put food and various other things in here. And tools sometimes for repairing your bike, maybe a little kitchen stove and pot might go in there as well. All depends on how you want to organize things. And then up front, they have another bag that's kind of strung out in front of the handlebars. That's usually a tent or a sleeping bag and a tent if you can fit it. And then in the back, they have maybe a sleeping pad and some clothes and maybe a little bit more food. All depends on how much gear you want to take. But you're really minimalist here. You really have to focus on, not going too far. So we have the frame bag, we have the handlebar bag, and we have a seat bag on the back, okay? And this is a common bike packing setup. And then up here on this one over here, this is more bike touring. And so these guys are going to go off-road. They're going to hit mountain bike trails. They're going to rip along different places. I watched a great video where these two guys actually do this setup and go on a trail system that goes from cabin to cabin to cabin. It was really good because they didn't need to bring a tent. Whereas this system here, they wouldn't go on, trails. They'd probably stick to gravel roads and paved roads, okay? It's like they have fenders on the bike, and they have panniers. They call these things panniers here, racks on the front and on the back that have panniers. Carry a little bit more gear, can get a little heavy and whatnot, but it's a pretty good system. The bags are usually waterproof of some sort, and you have clothes and gear in here and up here. You still have your water bottles on your bike. Notice that the guy's got a third water bottle even underneath his what they call down tube here. This is the down tube. This is the top tube and the seat tube of the bike. So the down tube here, he's got one underneath it. He's got it looks like a tent sitting up here, and this pannier is pretty full. He's got two panniers on each, the front and back. He's well loaded. He's got a lot of gear with him. Probably more gear than I'd want to take on a bike trip, just because it really starts to slow you down. But they call this bike touring because you're going to sort of stay more to the roads and gravel places or gravel roads maybe, and you're going to go through towns and communities, where this one you might get more into wilderness situations, a little bit of mixture of the two. Okay, so bike packing provides the need for ultra lightweight equipment. You really want to try to keep your equipment light. You don't want to go with crazy heavy gear, and you want to start thinking about minimalist packing, only one extra pair of shorts, one extra shirt, those kind of things. So you're not packing like a whole ton of gear. Whereas like car camping and RV camping, you can bring a lot more gear because there's more space and the weight doesn't really hold you down or limit your ability to get where you want to go. Food and water are often purchased along the way in these particular types of trips. Even the one where I talked about the guys bike touring, they would go to these cabins and they rent the cabin, and it would come with the food already in place. So they didn't have to pack a whole bunch of food along with them. They were able to actually access as much food as they wanted in these cabins. It was pretty sweet. Worth looking at too if you were into that kind of stuff. I definitely like to go do that trip that they did. Okay, and you usually have access to common resources like, they're not too far away. Amenities, emergency services, cell phone, those kind of things are all usually within range, right? It can be more wilderness camping, but bike packing usually follows well-used marked trails, so you're not typically going into anywhere really crazy into the wilderness, but you can kind of get to the edge of it, that's for sure. Like you can see yourself getting there. So that's bike camping. So we'll move down to the next thing, which is wilderness canoe tripping, and this is what our course is really designed to be focused on, okay, is we're going to wilderness canoe trip. And canoe tripping offers travel into the deepest wilderness and moves campers further away from common amenities. So you're not going to have access to stores or anything that you commonly see. In fact, when we do our wilderness trips, we don't see anything other than maybe a few other people who are doing the same thing we are doing. We do go into parks that tend to be set aside and reserved for this kind of tripping, which is really good. Ultra lightweight equipment helps, but it's not 100% essential, simply because the canoe is so good at carrying gear. If you have a bit heavier tent, medium weight kind of instead of ultra light, you're okay. You're not going to go with maybe the big huge car camping tent, but you don't have to spend the extra money on getting something super lightweight. Now, what you do have to do, though, is you have to bring all your food and water supplies or methods of obtaining water, usually filtration or boiling or whatever it is you're going to do to purify your water with you, okay? Every bit of food that you're going to need for your entire trip has to be with you, because there's not going to be stores, whereas like bike packing and bike touring, you usually stop at restaurants to eat meals and stuff, and you don't worry about it too much, okay? It's not as big a deal. But in this case, no way, man. You are on your own for food, okay? So everything you need has to be packed with you. You forget something, you're going without it, right? And you're not going to have it. So I've heard of stories where guys they pack all their certain types of foods. A lot of people will freeze some meat and bring it along for the first few days. And I've heard of guys who forgot that pack of frozen meat. They left it at home in the freezer. And you know what? When they get out there and they realize it day one, it's too late to go back and get it. So they just have to live without it. And the guy said, usually we pack enough food that it was crazy and we didn't starve. We managed just fine, right? You can often be very far away from emergency services in this case. So, if you're going to need rescue, it may mean a helicopter coming in to get you, because there just isn't other options. There isn't motorboats even usually on many of these lakes. They're so remote that we don't see motorboats buzzing around. Some places do, but most don't. You don't even often have cell service. So cell phone service is not even available in Algonquin Park, where we often go. So that is an issue. And the good thing about this kind of tripping is that you're generally only going to carry your gear on portages. So depending on the route you choose, if the portages aren't too long and too crazy, you can really limit the amount heavy carrying that you have to do. If you do, a trip that has a 2 kilometer portage, you got to remember though, now not only do you have to carry your food and your clothes and your tent and all that stuff, you also have to carry that canoe across that portage. So portage would be going from one lake or river over land to another lake or river. That's what we refer to as a portage. And those are the most challenging aspects of canoe tripping by far. Some trips you do, though, there can be very little or none, and others quite a bit. The trip we tend to do in our course has a fair bit, but not a crazy amount of portaging, 13 of them, in fact, and the longest one is about 1.6 kilometers. And then after this, we have something known as wilderness backpacking, and you can see the students that are, or packers here, who are all carrying everything. Now we're going into the wilderness and we're just carrying everything we want to bring. Okay. This allows you the deepest travel into the wilderness. You can climb mountains. You can go into places that are completely uninhabited on land. And you really do have to work the hardest. There's no question. This is the most challenging. It's hard on your body because every step you take, everywhere you go, you're carrying all of your gear. And it's not uncommon for sometimes people to have 50, 60, 70. I've even heard of people carrying 80 pounds on their back. It's crazy, but you want to get ultra light, ultra light. Like this is like absolutely 100% essential. The least amount of weight as possible. So you will spend extra money to just shave off little bits of weight on each material in hopes that, you can keep your weight down 3 or 4 or 5 pounds from a full pack. So to go from a 50-pound pack to a 40-pound pack is huge. Great movie. I'm trying to remember. Reese Witherspoon was the actress who played it. It was a great movie where she hikes the Pacific Rim Trail, and she starts off her trip with a pretty heavy pack, and as she goes, she starts to throw things out that she's not using and get rid of them, and she comes to little communities along the way, but it's a multi-day hike, like literally a month-long hike. And she actually has things mailed to her in advance as she goes, and foods and different things at different communities, but she's going to be a week or more in the wilderness, and it's pretty cool. A great film to watch as she does this bike packing trip. I can't remember. I want to say Into the Wild, but I know that that's not it. But maybe I'll look that up and let you know later what the film is. Emergency services can be a long way away, and you don't have access to amenities. You're not restocking things, so you need to be able to look after your food, your water. All those things have to be carried along with you, and this is by far the most challenging of all the tripping techniques that you would experience in camping, in my opinion. I've done a bit of this. I enjoy it a lot, but I do find it's a lot of pain sometimes carrying all that stuff. So in our course, we're going to focus mostly on canoe tripping, but a lot of the skills that you learn maybe in canoe tripping are easily transferable into bike packing. They're easily transferable into wilderness backpacking, and some of them will be appropriate for car camping and even RV camping. And the bottom line is, I don't really care what kind of camping you do. Just get the heck out there and enjoy yourself. It's just fun to be outdoors and doing the kind of things that really need to be done. Okay, enjoy and answer your questions, and we'll talk to you soon.